Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And we've had a bit of time to cool off after probably the worst Springbok performance we've seen under Rassie Erasmus. I think is probably quite fair. It was kind of building, I think, and that's I think the worrying part is that we weren't quite at our best against Italy. We weren't quite at our best against Georgia, scoring lots of tries, scoring lots of points, but leaking tries. And we've kind of sort of felt that maybe there isn't that kind of 80-minute intensity from the Boks that we're kind of used to. And I think tonight was a big sort of reminder of the fact that these things can happen. And if you don't address them, you don't really get on top of them, a result like this becomes possible. What I think is very important is that we've got to maintain perspective. We've got to take learnings out of this game. We've got to look at what went wrong, but also what went right, and kind of work out what does this mean for the future of the way we play. I mean, Rassie Erasmus gave a brutally honest press conference afterwards, and he said he's embarrassed, and he says coaches, they got it so wrong. And he said that they need to take on basically the blame, really. But also he said, there were good moments, and he said they got to try and find out why the Boks sort of overplayed at times, and why were they making the errors they made, and some individual errors. So there was quite a lot to sort of really pick apart when it comes to this performance. And I think the main thing is Bok fans who are very emotional, and I mean, I'm the same, and we were very upset after the game. We've got to maintain perspective. Yes, this is a worrying loss. And I think probably the reason it's so worrying is that we've kind of felt like this performance has been coming. But we also can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got to understand that when we try new things, when we try and build, which is the plan, that there is always the possibility of kind of results like this and these sort of things going wrong. And things went horribly wrong in this game. But things were also very right at certain parts. After 20 minutes, we were in full control, 22 points up, having played champagne rugby for the first 20 minutes, scoring more than a point a minute. And we were thinking, well, we are red hot. But unfortunately, we then just try to overplay things. And I think the biggest problem is we've got to start treating it like test match rugby once again. Yes, you want to score tries. I mean, we went out today looking to try and get a bonus point win. We came away with no points. Australia with 5 points in top of the Rugby Championship log, and we are currently in second place with no points. And we'll be down to fourth, likely, depending on what happens in New Zealand and Argentina. But unless there's a clear, more than 7-point victory there, we'll be tied at the bottom with whoever loses, this evening. So we've got to try and respond, because that should never have been a loss. We should never have not gotten a bonus point try, for example, after having scored 3 within 20 minutes. So we should have had 5 points. That's the reality, but we didn't. And we've got to learn about why we didn't. And I think it's very interesting to see the knee-jerk reaction, because everybody's sort of saying that Tony Ball, for example, doesn't work. We've got to go away from it, and we're going away from what's good. And, the Boks need to play the physical game, the likes of that. And I think I agree to a point. We've got to find the balance. And that's what Rassie Erasmus spoke about. We've got to find the balance between trying to play attacking rugby, but being far more defensively secure. And I think the frustrating thing is, but also the positive thing is, lots of Australia's tries were on turnover ball. Lots of Australia tries were based on individual errors made by the Boks when they tried to overplay. So when we play kind of this style of rugby, we can get it very right. I mean, the tries that we scored were beautiful. I mean, that Andre Esterhuizen try, the hands involved in that, the type of rugby involved in that, you could put that in the Hall of Fames, and it kind of, that's the kind of rugby everybody's been saying, the Boks are so boring and one-dimensional. And now we're trying to play this very expansive game, quick hands, long passes, very high level. But we're getting it wrong sometimes, and then teams are punishing us as a result. So it's about finding the balance. It's finding out when to play, when it's on, and when it's not on. We had a 75% ruck speed between 0 and 3 seconds. We were running that ball so quickly. And at times, it was a really good thing. I mean, I look at the Siya Kolisi try, and that was just an overload of pressure. And that's what even Joe Schmidt spoke about in his post-match press conference. He said the way they were flooding us, we just could not respond. We could not cope with what they were throwing at us. But we also gassed ourselves. We were then dead in our feet. And all of a sudden, when we were playing and on turnover ball, we didn't have the legs to be able to track back. We didn't have the capacity to be able to deal with those sort of counterattacks. And it's very weird that you see a Boks side kind of run off their feet like we did. And we kind of run ourselves off our feet. I think that's the frustrating part. It wasn't the case of through lots of defending against Australia and the pace of play, we then had to, we were just not coping. We kind of ran ourselves off our feet by trying to play everything, even when it wasn't on. And we've got to find that balance. Yes, we've now moved away from kicking a lot less, for example, but we've got to understand what the situation demands. I think that for me is the big key. Reading the situation. After 20 minutes, they suddenly got back to the game. What we should have done is sort of slow things down a little bit and gone tight. Scrums. Mauls. We barely mauled. Keep it loose. Keep it nice and tight. Get the players running at the Wallabies. Break down that defense. Break them down mentally, physically. Because we didn't use the altitude advantage because we didn't make them defend enough. We didn't make them make enough tackles. I think the Wallabies made about 130 odd tackles. We need to make them make 200 tackles. Because then when you've got the space and you've got Malibok and the likes of the players who can get the ball out wide, and against a tired team, that's when you exploit them. But the problem is we gassed ourselves out, and then they were still in the fight, and they came back, and then we couldn't cope with what it is, and we still kept trying to overplay it. We still kept trying to sort of throw out, the offload and the pop up off the ground, and sometimes we just needed to keep it a bit tighter. Now, I don't think we need to go completely away from what we're trying to do, because there's merit in what we're trying to do. We need to find a way to pick apart some of the best defenses in the world. So you've got to have a playbook and players who can do that, who can take on the best defense in the world, find gaps, find those spaces and punish teams. But we've got to do it intelligently. And I think if we look at some of the stats here, for example, it speaks about the fact that territory-wise, look where we played in the 22. 43% of the game in the 22. That's a good thing. That means you're dominating a team. You're all over them. However, our conversion rate in the 22, I actually don't think it's on that page, was 1.4 points. Now, that's going to be over 2, for example. And I think what we should have done maybe a bit better at times is when you're in the 22, let's keep it tight. Go phase after phase after phase, relentless, but ball retention, ball retention. Make them defend 15, 16 phases and then go out wide and have a go. Make that mistake of a penalty advantage and then we can have a go. But the problem was we sometimes try to overplay it and then knocked it on, for example, or got isolated and the breakdown just wasn't good enough as well. And I think sometimes the reason the breakdown wasn't good enough is our players got isolated through this sort of expansive game plan. So we've got to be more situationally aware of when it's on and when it's not. You talk about like earning the right to go wide. It's a similar kind of vibe. You've got to earn the right to play expansive rugby. And we've got to realize also what we're good at, which is keeping it tight. And we are supposed to be a very good mauling side. Our lineouts are a worry. A breakdown is a worry. The scrums, we didn't get enough scrums. I think that was the frustration. If we look at our scrums, I think I've just gone past it. Here we go. 4 scrums. We're a team that needs 8 scrums, 9 scrums, 10 scrums. Get into the 22, call a penalty. When you get a penalty, call a scrum. And have a go. Have a go at them. Because that's a big part of our game. Get that penalty advantage and have a go. But they had more scrums than us, but you can't be letting teams have more scrums. We've got to be putting pressure on them and finding ways. We had the scrum of the halfway line, for example. We've got to find better ways of playing to our strength. For me, 69% is a number that stands out so quickly. We've got to fix the lines out. It's been brewing for a while. Bongi Manami once again came on and struggled. Malcolm Marks also struggled. We've got to get the line outs right. Because we cannot launch attacks off set piece if we're not winning more than 85%, really, of our lineouts. Even our kickoffs weren't great. So there's a lot to unpack here. Turnover, 17 lost. A lot of it does speak to this expansive game plan we're trying to play. Players getting isolated and losing that turnover versus keeping it tight. Tackles made, Wallabies made 157 tackles. That needs to be over 200. Look, they tackled well. In fairness, they defended well to the Wallabies. It was actually a defensive masterclass, really, in the 60 minutes after the first 20. But also look at the kick to ratio. We know we kicked less than 20 times. I don't think there was a single test in the British and Irish Lions series with fewer than 20 kicks. And you look at the kick to pass ratio, 1 to 11 to 6. The passes we made, 209 passes. So we did move the ball around a lot, but I think sometimes we overplayed, and that was Rassie Erasmus saying. So I think the main point here is fix our set plays and go back to our strengths and use it as a core part of our game. And then bring in, the Tony ball inverted commas. Earn the right to play aggressively. Earn the right to be positive. Because I think today we try to be positive for the sake of it. And we saw moments why it's so effective. But also we saw why it can't be effective over 80 minutes. So I don't think we need to panic. I think that's the big thing. We don't need to panic because we can fix this. But it'll be interesting to see how much we maybe go a bit more conservatively next week. Or do we still continue to play in the way we want to play? I think we will see a bit of a shake-up. I'll be interested to see the type of team we select. But I think we need to start finding that sort of balance. And I'll be interested, for example, to see our scrum half and fly half combination next week. Do we now go with the Morne van der Berg to start, or Kobus Reiner to start? More sort of technically sound scrum halves who can play a more tactical game, and then bring on Grant Williams for that last 20 to speed up play. Because at the moment, what we had, especially, 2023, was we had slow starts and strong finishes. Now we've got the complete opposite, where we're starting strong and then fading in the game. And we've got to find ways of adjusting that. We saw the same thing in Argentina last year, where we started like a house on fire, and then they came back. So we've now fixed the starting strong part, but we've kind of lost our impact in the final 20 minutes. Usually, even when we were down 11 points, I'm thinking with 15 minutes to go, this is usually where we come to our own. I also think next week, 6-2 split will be back. 100%. That 6-2 split will be back, if not a 7-1. To be honest, I think we will suddenly go and try and bully them, because we have to, and we did. I mean, 10 dominant tackles, for example. Physically, we were there, but we didn't use our physicality enough. We didn't impose ourselves enough on the Wallabies. What would you change? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Big week of analysis upcoming. I'll be interested to see what everybody has to say. But my main thing is, let's not panic, Boks fans. Get behind the team. Get behind the coaching staff who have never let us down in the long term. They've made a mistake. They've gotten it wrong. We know they can fix it. Let's see how they fix it, and let's see how we go next week.